In some of my other videos, I talked about how I experienced DMT and other psychedelics to increase my creativity, specifically through, well, actually in a lot of ways, but yeah, a huge amount in my art. So right now in this video, I think it would be a good idea to talk about what the mechanisms I think for why it's improving creativity. I should therefore start this off with a little bit of history. So this all goes back to a technique called Klecksography, and it was pioneered by someone named Justinus Kerner. So basically what they would do is they would drop a ink blot on a sheet of paper, and then they would fold it in half so that the sheet of paper would mirror. And then when they unfolded it, it would have a abstract image, and then he would basically use his pareidolia to see what images that ink blot looks like, and then he would make like a story or a poem or a piece of artwork and all of the above with that. So that's little technique gave way to something called the Rorschach test, or the ink blot test, and it's something that's used in psychology to test people's personality. And I'm sure you guys heard about it. It's the butterfly winged test that they say, and then they ask people, you know, what do you see in this? And so that's working on our pareidolia, which is our tendency to find meaningful patterns in meaningless things like the ink blot. The very process of trying to look for patterns in things is exactly what fuels creativity and the artist's ability to make very deep, abstract artworks. They've also done work studying creativity and consciousness and imagination with the Rorschach test, so it had a lot of potential for a lot of these different avenues, and even what I'm going to be talking about. So my journey started around 2011. So that was when I started, I got into DMT and stuff like that. So I started to draw my visions, and this was the very first drawing that I did. So I remember that I posted this one, and I called it like the tryptamine fractal blizzard. And then everyone said that, you know, it looked very inspired, and it flowed very nicely, and people said that it looks very similar to what they've experienced in the DMT state. So how I did that basically is, and this is it's much easier to do this with DMT, and I'll explain why, versus any other longer acting psychedelic. So it's very hard to draw your visions and have them be very authentic and accurate from psilocybin or LSD, because it makes your hands very clammy and you're unable to focus. So it's very hard to get any sort of good artwork because you don't really have control of your linear thinking faculties. So that's where DMT comes in. So DMT, since it only has a 5-minute duration, a little bit longer for the come down, once you're out of it, you have a lot more control. Like you're not as clammy and disorganized as you are in a psilocybin trip or an LSD trip. Because with LSD and psilocybin, you have all this art that you're seeing, but you just can't bring it out because you're physically, you know, unable to function. I mean, some people might be able to function, but me personally, it's very tough. But I like to try to, you know, challenge myself and try to see if I can draw even on psilocybin or LSD, but I haven't quite mastered that yet. But with DMT, it was very easy because I didn't have that clamminess. So once I smoked DMT, I basically saw this like Fibonacci interference pattern type dragon thing in it, and I remembered the Fibonacci type movement, and it was tunneling. So I had that image burned in my head, and when I got out of the trip, I still had that image, and I was able to basically trace it from my head. So that's a talent that some people believe that you can hone, because I've had a lot of experience just drawing things from my imagination, But like things that I know, like I'll try to I would draw a lot of Dragon Ball Z characters or Carnage and Venom, and so you would have to practice using your visual eye and trying to remember details. And other people have talked about training this by looking at specific sceneries and then closing your eyes and then trying to, or moving away from that scenery and then trying to recreate that scenery as best you can. So those are the kind of techniques that you need to hone to be able to do this specific thing. So when you get those types of techniques, it makes it a lot easier to be able to utilize DMT to smoke maybe a lower breakthrough dose so that you can sort of go in and then just act like a camera and take like a snapshot of what you see, and then right when you're out of it, just get right to drawing it and try to get it exact as possible. So that's what I did, and I was able to get really good results. And I want to go over how this ties into Klecksography and the Rorschach test. So right away, I had an image that I didn't really know what it was. It was just a whole lot of meaninglessness because it was just a copy of what I saw in my head. So then I started using the ink blot method thing, where you have to look for patterns, and that's utilizing the pareidolia. So immediately I started to see in like a huge amount of patterns, and this happened, or this lasted for a while. I just kept finding more and more things, and it was amazing that this one drawing had so many things that my brain could make connections to, and they all seem to align with each other, or the concepts seem to be the same. Like, I'll give examples of what I saw in the piece. So right away I could see a swan in the center, and on the side you can see a little chess piece, and then there's little checkerboard symbol stuff. So I didn't know the significance of that meaning, but if you can watch my other videos, specifically the chessboard and the Freemason one, that's an extremely deep, esoteric idea that I didn't have any concept of, yet it showed up in my work. And so I'm basically, those are the two connections that I made. So then I did the real Rorschach thing, and I took the image and I made it a mirror image like the Rorschach, and coincidentally it looked like wings, or it looked like butterfly wings. So it's funny that this piece is meant to represent what I believe is hyperspace, or DMT, because we believe we go to hyperspace. So I thought it was a very interesting thing that what I drew was like butterfly wings, like it was a transcendence, like moving from like the third dimension into the fourth, and the fourth dimension signified a caterpillar breaking up into a butterfly. And in my other videos, I also talked about how I saw a connection to it being the Calabi-Yau manifold, which ties into string theory. I would also see a toroidal field, or a electromagnetic field. So with all these patterns that I was seeing in this this piece that I basically did a DMT Klecksography, it seemed like it unified all of these concepts, so that's why I called it the unified field. They all sort of converged into a single idea, or the same idea, and it was so poetically perfect and simple and basic, and it came out of noise. It came out of nothing. It was like it was handed to me. And I've seen this over and over. Like, this is the technique that I use to make my artwork, and it creates such incredible results, and I get a lot of interesting responses from people. What's really weird about this is that I often feel like the more patterns I look for in this thing, it's like the more that they manifest, because this is kind of like numerology a little bit, and if you watch that movie Pi with the crazy computer, I think he was a computer programmer, but he was trying to find patterns in pi. So it was basically like how it was explaining how people who have this sort of gift, when they have it in overdrive, they start looking for secrets in something that might not have it, and it's this whole concept sort of it was really profound to me, and I often feel like it's more than just coincidence. Like it's almost like it's like magic or something. Like this is beyond art, and it's going into like wizardry territory, and it's kind of funny, really. But I think that's about it. I just wanted to share that because I thought it was an interesting theory, and I hope you learned something from it. So good night.